I slept in. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're just doing our show now.
I absolutely love that. I slept in a little bit too,
See,
which was really nice. And then I got up to my pony had injured herself a bit, so um,
it's
yeah,
been a Saturday.
that would be a very true statement.
He's Dewey Freeman. I'm Mark Sylvester. We're the Elder Council. Hey, Mr. Freeman, we're on YouTube now.
I know. You know what's
Yeah,
happening? I
what's happening?
opened my YouTube feed and there we are. And I'm like going, how the heck did we get there?
Well, that was kind of an easy one to have you see your own stuff.
Yeah, but it's like I'm going, who are these people?
You know,
So,
I
so
I
now we just
love,
have to hopefully get some people to watch it.
yeah, it's doing 100 shows and then releasing them all at once like that was a power move. We're already 6 shows past that, and the I talk to people all the time about what we're now. I can talk to people all the time
Hmm.
what we're
Hmm.
doing, why we're doing it, who we're doing it for, and I now am listening all week long, thinking about what would be appropriate to talk about on Saturday. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is, and we've talked about this, what are the things we should have, we should be skilled in, soft skills and hard skills, by the time we're 10, by the time we're 20, by the time we're 30, by the time we're 40, 50, 60, 70, how to work with money, how to work with other people, how to be a civilian, like all the things. And I'm writing an extensive thing on this. But I heard something this week that was really, really interesting. I listened to a man named Scott Galloway, who has
Boy, that
done,
name sounds really
well,
familiar.
he's a business professor at NYU in the Stern School. He's one of the smart he's one of the smart ones, big time, but he's quick. He's a man's man, if in a way that is akin to the kind of men we strive to be and we
Hmm.
help people strive to be. Um, and he talks to young people, young men, a lot. And so he's done a lot of work. Scott Galloway is a great follow on Instagram and in podcasts for those listening. What he said was that the hardest years for a man are between 25 and 45.
Hmm.
I've repeated that a couple of times this week, and I've got people, without me saying anything, just that, and they're shaking their heads and you're right. Right, because by the time you're 25, you're barely out of the nest and you're out of school and you're kind of just getting going in whatever your career is going to be.
Hmm.
And then you've got 20 years to married, family, kids, home, established, middle management, and you kind of have it fairly together by the time you're 45. And then you have a new set of challenges, which we'll talk about in a different show. But as I say that, um, do you agree with it? Let me start there.
Um, in some ways, yes. In other ways, I'm not sure.
What are you not sure?
um, I I oftentimes look at the time between 20 and 35, and more recently, it's been more like 23, 24, and 40. So actually, if I look at it like that, but part of what I've seen is sort of developmentally in adulthood, we do 15-year chunks,
Mhm.
like 20 to 35, 35 to 50, 50 to 65, and then 65 and older. So I do see a bit of a distinction between, I see a huge shift in men from 35 to 45. It's almost like they're not the same person many times.
Well, why is that?
Um, my take is between 20 and 35, men are actually trying to figure out how to be an adult. And particularly an adult man in a world that actually oftentimes on one level where there's a lot of acceptance and privilege, and on another level there's very little acceptance and privilege. And then the age between 35 and 50 is, now that I'm an adult, who am I in the world almost?
Mm.
How do I
Mm.
navigate this, being a businessman or whatever craft I'm in or whatever profession,
So,
something
so
like that.
it feels like you're like an apprentice adult,
Yeah, sort of
and
between
then you
20 and
kind of become a
35.
journeyman adult,
Yeah, that
and
is
then you
not
become
a
a
bad way to
master
put it.
adult.
I like that. An apprentice, a journeyman, and a master. I like that.
Right? So I'd like to talk today about apprentice, because one of the things that uh, I I measure time with my grandchildren,
Mm,
and because I got married 3 weeks after my oldest grandson was born, my first grandson, and so I measure everything against that. So he'll be 18 in a month, exactly a month. And he's graduating from high school, did really well, getting a golf scholarship to Cal Marine.
wow.
He has a general idea of the career he wants to have something to do with Marine. He's leaving it open to what it is. But 18 is only 2 years from 20, which is what you're saying. So it's almost this, it's nearly the same. And
Yes.
he's going to go to college and a free associate with 20-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 21-year-old. So he's going to be in that mix. And it's that beginning away from home, still in school, still in a structured environment, yet there's much more freedom within
Hmm.
that constrained system. And so I think about things in that way. So I think how what will influence him in being a man in that world. He's already seen his dad's friends, and all of that, and that's all been very, very positive. And I'm just, it's very curious because I don't think there's something like us for that, for the apprentices, for those apprentice men until now.
And when you say until now, what do you mean?
Well, we didn't have, this show didn't exist.
Oh,
And
got
as
it.
I've talked to people, they've said, gosh, there's such a need for what you guys are doing. So I'm really trying to hone in on the service aspect of what we do
Right.
and thinking about, so I can, whenever I do a show, I try to think of who the person who's listening to is. And so I have his picture.
Hmm.
So I can kind of think about him and what are the things as a man, how is he show up as an apprentice adult,
Hmm.
as an apprentice adult man?
Well, one of the things that I see, which is really interesting, they're talking about your grandson here. That first 2 years out of high school, I think, is one of the more important 2 years of a man's life. And I have spent a lot of time with adolescents. I've spent a lot of time with people between 18 and 22. And because I worked in academia for a long time, the difference between an 18 or 19-year-old is that's a dramatically different process than being 20 or 21.
Mm.
And here's the reason I think why is that first 2 years that someone goes to college, or they go to maybe the military, or they're entering into a vocation, they they're trying to find their way in the world, is that process of transition from everything's taken care of for you to,
Mm.
oh, you actually have to do something yourself. Now, I know that some people live at home and et cetera, but even with that, there's a difference. That turning 18 is a huge piece in our society around legal issues.
Mhm.
If somebody is under 18 and something happens, they're charged as a minor. If someone's 18 in one day, they're charged as an adult. Someone's under 18, they can't sign for their own apartment. If someone's over 18, they can. So that first 2 years between 18 and 20, I think, is a big transitional process normally.
Let me stay with that for just a second. Are there three things that came up on the regular that you could say these were the three that were most likely to happen, and then how you helped these young adults get through those things?
Like the piece between 18 and 20?
Yeah, because part of what I hope we can do here, the big vision is we're like the cheat codes to life.
The AI cheat codes?
Well, no, it's we earned
No.
every tip we have, we earned, which is the point of it. And
Right.
I'm thinking, especially this generation understands cheat codes. Don't like to say it like that, but it's like, hey, let me know. It's like a Sherpa. Hey, I know you're going to need oxygen, so I've already put 2 bottles up ahead the curve. So that we're Sherpas, right? To
Right.
say,
Right.
hey, man, these are the things we saw happen over and over and over again. And this is how you can tell that's happening. And this is how you can handle it. So at least it's like eyes wide open, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
where I'm going. Are
Hopefully.
there three things?
Well, I think the one biggest thing that is what I've seen as the most daunting to most people is that legally nobody can save them.
Nobody can save them.
Right.
Huh. How does that? I mean, do they live their life a little reckless because they've always had a net?
Yes. Many people do. There's a whole piece in adolescence of um, of living life on the edge, of impulsivity, of all of those kinds of things. And when you're 16, if you're impulsive around shoplifting or you're impulsive around speeding or everything's as a juvenile. And even if there's a legal thing, unless it's a certain kind of felony, as soon as you turn 18, that all that legal stuff goes away. But once you're 18 in one day, none of that legal stuff goes away.
So
Yeah,
does this weigh on the 18 and 19-year-old? Are they aware of it, or are they only aware of it when they hit the long arm of the law?
most of them are only aware of it when they run into it. And so one of the cheat codes would be start being aware of that, because that's where the level of responsibility changes dramatically. So one of the things in the nation, the uncivilized nation, is that there are no rules. There's just responsibility. And that I like, that statement I like. And under 18, if you live by, well, there's no real rules, but there's responsibility, that's actually not a true statement.
Because there
Because
are.
yeah. Well, there are rules and there's there's way less responsibility. Like once you're 18, it's like you have the same level of responsibility as a 50-year-old. And that shift, I think, is a really hard shift.
So how do you, other than say, just like call that into being? So it's like, okay, now I know that. Is there a, any counseling or coaching around that? Around, like, for me as a martial artist, tenet number 4 is self-control, right? So I think about that a lot, right? Self-control is a thing that, is a governor on me, right? At
Yes.
times.
Well, I think the biggest thing is the shift of getting that it's on you.
Hmm.
And it's self-control versus other control. So let me talk about the word responsibility real quick. Ultimately, the word responsibility has to do with the ability to respond. That's what that word means. Do I have the ability to respond to blank, whatever that blank is? When someone is under 18, there's an assumption that we have less ability to respond to certain things. And particularly, when we're 15, 16, 17. At 18, nobody cares whether you have truly the ability to respond to something. They will say that you have to have the ability to respond. It's no longer a choice. So that's one piece.
I think I would love, just define responsibility again one more time, because this is clearly going to show up in the points to remember from this show, because that's such a reframing of that word.
Yes. Responsibility is often seen as a burden. It's like, oh, you have so much responsibility. That's actually not the way that I look at it. The way that I look at responsibility is what the word actually means, which is, do I have the ability to respond to something? Do you have the ability to respond to something? And the younger we are, the less ability we have to respond to something.
So what is it? So I think of ability as a skill, right?
Yes.
And so how do we hone that particular skill?
Well, a lot of that depends on our parenting or the parenting that we received.
Mhm.
And a lot of that depends on on what has happened in our lives around things like school, sports, et cetera, et cetera. The place that many people miss the responsibility piece, it's almost a polarity where on one level, someone says you're responsible for everything, even
Okay.
though the person has no ability to do anything.
Mm.
An extreme example is, the 3-year-old spills their milk on the floor. Well, their ability to respond to clean that up is pretty minimal. A good parent might say, come and help me clean it up, and get a bunch of paper towels and both of them get down on the floor to help clean it up. But there is no underlying expectation that this little being can really clean up and mop the floor and, do it enough to make sure it's not sticky afterwards and all of that stuff. It's the beginning of it, but
Mm.
it's not there all the way. A 15-year-old has full ability to clean up spilled milk. If a parent shames the 15-year-old or the 3-year-old for spilling their milk, then then responsibility becomes a burden, and there's a lot of judgment with it. And that's what shame brings in. If the parent goes, don't worry, sweetie, I'll clean it up, whether they're 3 or whether they're 15, then what happens is the 3 or the 15-year-old never learns how to respond because someone's always doing it for them. Those are the polarities. There is a middle ground where people are going, as you age, as you grow, we have some expectation of you to move in and do something, respond to this differently as a 15-year-old than you did a 3-year-old. At 18, we are expected by our society to have the ability to respond. That's what we're expected to do. And if we've either been overburdened or everyone's done everything for us, we don't learn how to do that.
I'm curious because I'm also, as you know, I'm fascinated with intergenerational stuff. And we're of an age now to be able to look back at, we're boomers. We can look at Gen X, we can look at the millennials, we can look at the Gen Z, and we can look at the COVID kids, Gen A, that are coming up. And there have been really strong cultural things that have occurred during each of those generations, which I think have shaped the environment that they're growing in, part of the culture, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that responsibility is notwithstanding what you said, but the notion of being responsible is more important to this generation that's coming now? I'm going to say Gen Z, or less important, or not even on their radar?
I think learning how to do it is ultimately more important. And at least from what I can see, it's been taught less than previous generations.
Well, I think so. We're 2 generations removed from you and I. And I think of being, you know, responsibility was a big thing in my home because I was a latchkey kid. So I was responsible for my
Mm-hmm.
brother. I was responsible for things around the house. I was responsible. That word is a big word. It's kind of a triggering word,
Yes,
right?
totally.
And I had to develop the ability to respond, to be able to do those things, to develop the skills to be responsible, to pay attention, to do things, et cetera, et cetera. And it just feels different. I don't know. So I want to go, or let you respond, and then I want to go to your number 2 thing.
Got it. Here's what I see. And this will actually lead to number 2. Is in this most recent generation, there is an underlying desire, belief that things should be easy and quick.
Mm.
This is the first generation that all of their life they have had computers, smartphones, the kind of communication technology that we have, all of those things.
I say they're used to zero latency.
Yes, exactly. Which is when I was growing up and there was the early Star Trek movies and all of those kinds of things, and even Dick Tracy. There was we can talk into our watch, we can press a button and communicate, and all of that stuff was in the future. Well, now it's present for everybody. There's, I know parents who are buying their 5-year-old smartphones. And it's like, I'm going, really? So the idea of everything should be quick and everything should be easy is a huge, huge issue.
Because
Because that's not the way we work. It's not the way things are.
I was just going to poke on that just a little bit. If everybody that they're go back to my grandson, he's going to be in school, and everybody around him is living quick and easy. So why shouldn't it be quick and easy, doctor? Just because it wasn't for us doesn't mean it couldn't be for them.
The idea of, I know you're poking at this, which is actually pretty funny, is the idea of communicating quick and easy, the idea of doing a text to, I can do a text to you and you're, what, 1,500 miles away? And you can get it in seconds. That part is lovely to be quick and easy. Relationships, life, struggles, those things.
Humans aren't quick and easy.
We are not quick and easy.
Okay.
There are no quick fixes.
There you go.
So that's tenet number 2.
That's it. Yeah.
Is there are no quick fixes to bigger issues. And the one I would use, this isn't even a problem, but it's like somebody says, I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to run a marathon.
Swipe left to be trim and fit. Swipe
exactly. Right. And this was a lesson for me. And I'm trying to think how old I would have been then. Mid-20s, which is actually sort of where we started this. I decided that I was going to start running to get in shape. I had skied and I was in really good shape. And then I laid off of that for a while. And then it was like, and I didn't do much. And it was probably 4 or 5 years later. And I went for my first, it was actually longer than that later because I was 28. I just remembered. I went out, and because I had skied, I was a Nordic skier. I was a very good Nordic skier. And I was still skiing some in the winter, but I was not racing any longer. I thought, oh, hell, I'd just go run a couple miles. And I thought, in the back of my head, I thought, oh, maybe I'll run a marathon. Well, my first 2 miles that I ran, I thought I was sort of hot shit for about the first 3/4 mile. Then about a mile and a half in, I was going, this is way harder than I thought. By the time I got home, it was like all I could do to make it through the rest of the evening.
You make it through the marathon?
Yeah, to make it through the marathon that first day. It takes work to run a marathon.
Takes work to be a human.
It takes work to be a human. We can't press a button and run a marathon. We can't press a button and become a black belt. We can't press a button. Yeah, I mean,
So it,
well, let
so
me
when
just
you're,
say,
yeah, sorry.
people don't know this about you, or at least not everyone. You are the person that created the technology for all of the animation for that's on the screen. You're that person. You did not learn how to do that in 10 minutes.
Mhm.
I don't know how many years it took you to figure that out,
Oh, wow.
but you didn't learn to do that in 10 minutes. You learned to do that in what I'm going to guess a couple of decades.
Yeah.
And it was not a, oh, I'm going to sit down and do this for 10 minutes a day. I mean, I know you well enough to know when you dive into something like that, it is 10 to 12 hours a day, not 10 minutes a day. And then after you take a little nap, you do a couple more hours, and then you get a 4-hour night's sleep, and then you do it all
Busted,
over again.
busted.
Exactly. And
By
it's
the
the
way,
same.
that hasn't changed.
Yes, I know that hasn't changed. That's part of why you and I are friends, because, and as good of friends as we are, because we do that. That's what we do. And both of us, and so this is tenet number 2, is that that nothing, that there are no quick fixes to things. When you decided, however you decided to begin working on this animation piece, that didn't happen overnight. And you've even told me stories of, you being the person that, in the Lord of the Rings, it was going back and forth and helping them do all of their animation stuff. And that was what, 7 years? Over a period of 7 years?
And just so the record is straight, listening to where they were stuck, understanding what they were trying to do, coming back to Santa Barbara and talking to our team, saying here, so I was the ambassador between both. So it was the ability to kind of bring that situation to my team, because we had 600 people working on those things, right? But it was the being able to get, it's like be in the room where it happens. Being able to get the Lord of the Rings
Yes.
project in the first place was 2 of us, absolutely. And then to deliver over a period of several years, as you said, the things that they needed to go on. And they did so much work, and I'm still very, very good friends with all of those folks.
Yes,
So
exactly.
to your point, it takes a while to do those things. And what I'm curious about is, as you are talking to 18 and 19 and 20 and 21-year olds, how did they express their frustration that the world wasn't that quick? Hey, happening instant. And I don't want to talk about instant gratification. I think that's different, but that it
I
doesn't
would agree.
happen instantly. How,
The
how
piece
did
that
you
I
help
see
them through that?
happening is that people find themselves frustrated and they judge themselves
Oh,
for not being able to do it quick.
oh, oh,
Instead of seeing being able to see the small steps that they take.
oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
And instead of, it's like if you don't go from A to Z in one step, Like people do not allow themselves to be rewarded by their try.
Wow. I'm thinking we run an improv school, as you know, and we get people that are not even white belts yet. They've never done it before. They were brought by a friend or they saw a poster and they went, "Hey, now is it? I'm going to go try it." And we have a young lady who has been with us maybe 4 months, maybe since the first of the year, and uh, and she takes the coaching, and she's been getting better, and you can tell.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I let her know, "Hey, you made really good choices tonight," or I'm side coaching on the side, no questions, no questions. And you could see her go and change on the fly. Tonight, she will be appearing for the first time with the house team. We're guests over at Santa Barbara Improv, and we're going to do 2 sets tonight. And will be
Mhm.
her debut. And she feels like she's not good enough yet. Let me wait until I'm better. And I said, there is an experience that you get, that being on stage is part of the training. Like
Yes.
that, we can't teach you that on Tuesday night. That's why we try to get as many reps as possible for ourselves as well, because there is a learning that happens when there's live people laughing or not
Yes.
laughing. And I think that's to your point of recognizing the incremental steps, and then I take lots of gratitude for, well, okay, got that. I worked on one thing. I executed that one thing. And I always, as you know, always think about it. I'm sharpening the sword. I'm sharpening the sword.
Mhm, mhm.
Sharpening the sword.
Exactly. And so that would be number 2, and then number 3 that I would say is that suffering is part of life.
Ooh. Um, in all dimensions of our life, our personal, our public, our professional, our educational, our as an 18-year-old, they may have had a little bit of suffering. They didn't get the part, they didn't make the team, they didn't do as well as a I mean, there's but suffering, I think suffering is the loss of a love, the loss of a loved one, but the loss of love, that first major breakup. Uh,
Mhm.
was at the vet yesterday and talking to the receptionist while we were waiting for my boy to get his fluids, and she was saying she's married to her high school sweetheart. They've been together 12 years, and I was like, wow. Where many high school sweethearts break up because you go to
Yeah.
college and you're gone and you meet, and it's that loss of the first love. What other kind of suffering? Because I'm going to guess that there's a level of suffering I haven't even discussed.
Well, you have discussed part of it because it is a loss of something, or a non acceptance into a club, or we get teased, or we don't get chosen for a team, or we get told to go try harder, and those things are that's a part of it. The other part of it is, in some ways, it's a self-induced process. When and and again, I think the sports or martial arts analogy is perfect. It's like, how many times were you thrown in martial arts before you could figure out how to not be thrown,
Or how to do a break fall.
or how to do a fall that you don't go, oh fuck, you know? How many times have you, like, most of the sports that I have excelled in, have been endurance sports.
Mm.
And even running a marathon, there at the 20-mile mark, there's the infamous it's called hitting a wall. And you almost, and I mean, unless you're a super highly elite athlete, you're going to end up hitting a wall. Most people will. And it's like there's that half an hour in there at 20 miles between like mile 20 and 22 and a half, where you're just going, I can't move my legs anymore. I don't give a shit. Who cares if I finish? And we
That's where
will,
perseverance comes in, right?
yes. And it's where when we say, okay, this is a part of this.
Mm.
If we say this is a part of
Mm.
this, then
Mm.
we make it through. If we say, oh, I
Mm.
shouldn't be suffering, then we're
So
not going to make it through.
we yes and the suffering rather than no butting the suffering, rather than
Exactly.
denying the suffering.
Exactly.
Ah,
And it's the same thing with relationships. It's the same thing. I mean, you and I have spoken. Like you and your Kimberly are incredibly in love and you have a great relationship. Me and my Kimberly are incredibly in love and we have a great relationship. There have been times in my relationship with Kimberly where I have felt absolutely horrible. And I'm not saying that I mean, she's not, she's never been abusive. She's never been mean. She's never been any of those things. But it's like when some reality hits around something, it's like, fuck. And, um, and there's a suffering that happens that it's like, how am I going to make it through this?
mm.
And the same thing, I think, happens like 2 times this year. We had a weather event in January here where it was below zero for almost 5 days. On day 5, it got above zero in the daytime, got up to like 10. And Kimberly was out of town and I was taking care of the horses. The water here froze. I mean, it was like a total pain in the ass. And if I were sitting here going, I hate this, I hate this, I hate this.
Mm.
I had the fire. We heat our house with a wood burning stove. The fire was going 24 hours a day. And after 2 or 3 days, I had to let it go out so I could clean out the ashes so I'd have room to keep another fire going. But it was like that stuff happens. About 5 or 6
Oh,
weeks ago. Oh, go ahead.
so suffering, the way you get through suffering, because it's a fact of life. When we're talking
The
about
fact of life.
straight up fact of life, number one, you are going to turn 18 and you will be legally responsible. Fact of life. Number two, life is not quick and easy stuff. If humans are involved, it's going to take time. And number three,
Yes.
fact of life is suffering.
Yes.
So
Well,
we've looked at ways to
that there
deal
will
with
be
it.
suffering in our life. It's not that
Yeah,
we're always going to suffer, but there will be
correct, correct,
suffering in
correct,
our
correct,
life.
correct, correct. And that the if you tend to be a victim, then suffering will be exacerbated. And if you tend to not be a victim, like you could have been a victim of the cold, it wasn't your fault. I mean, it was cold. You could have been all like that, right? Victimized,
Right.
right? As opposed to, I'm not going to be a victim. This is tough. This is a challenge, but I don't need to suffer. Is that right?
Well, it's almost like this is tough. This is a challenge. And when I was filling up hay bags at 18 below zero with my bare hands, it was like, this fucking hurts.
Yeah. Yeah.
This, but what I didn't do was judge the fact that it hurt. I
I
didn't
mean,
go well, I went, this fucking hurts. And I could fill up 1 or 2 bags and I had to wear my hands, and I'd fill up another bag, and a couple times I just put hay out on the ground because my hands were so cold I couldn't make a bag of hay. So it wasn't like, it was like, oh, this is what you do. This is how this works. Versus, this should never be like this. I shouldn't have to do this.
That should word.
Yes, exactly. This is what happens when it gets 18 below zero. And the truth is, I saw it as a challenge. I saw it as I was incredibly proud of myself that I made it through that, and made it through that well. And I was getting up every 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the night to go up and
And
check on horses.
you're a couple years past 70, and you
Yes,
have the awareness of that. So now let's try to land this plane.
right on.
So we're talking about the premise of I'm looking at I want to be doing this for the next several weeks, looking at little age related
Yeah,
things.
this is a great idea.
And I love this. We narrowed in on a 2-year block, right? As part of this larger being an apprentice, an adult apprentice. The three things, the three facts of life, if you will, like the episode could be called Facts of Life, but there's a lot of them. These are 3 of them, and you don't really need to pay attention to them until you're this age. They're going to come up more and more when you're this age. So am I on track so far?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to guess that people at 20, 25, 30, 35 that didn't come to grips with these 3 facts of life have a lot of drama and trauma in their life.
Yeah, and they end up getting themselves stuck. And it's a really interesting piece, and especially for men in relationship. When a man is 40 and they haven't gone, oh, I am responsible. Oh, there's no quick fixes. And they haven't gone, oh, there is suffering. When they haven't come to terms with those, what I hear their wives or partners say is, I feel like I'm living with an 18-year-old.
So this show isn't just for 18-year-olds, is what you're telling me, Doc?
That would be true. Well, so we can have a 40-year-old man or woman, but we're speaking mostly to men right now, that still feels like they're 18, and then they don't know why their relationship's not working.
I never know how we're going to get to the places we get to, but we always get there. I think this is such an important show to this idea of, we might even call it the facts of life, do a whole section of things,
I love that. I love that direction.
Because I think when we say the facts of life, there's an assumption we're kind of just talking about sex.
Exactly.
Right. And it's not.
That's 1% of the facts of life.
Yeah. Hey, I love you.
I love you so much. Thank you so much.
This is a great show. A lot of people are going to get some help out of this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.